Hey everyone, it's me, Ori Dosset Rashid. I'm your anthropologist and sociologist. If you're Italian, please call me Emiliano, then thank you very much. I've been an hour late with this live stream, my bad. I was a bit tired, so I forgot the timer. But anyway, I'm here, and I'll do the other live stream right after it immediately, so I didn't forget about you guys. But anyway, please hit the like button, everyone, share this live stream, subscribe to the channel, become a member of the channel. Donate the links below. Thank you very much for your contribution. You can book a session with me, a one-on consultation. Check the fees and instruction in the description box below. You can purchase my novels on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, where you can find them. And above all, pay close attention to this live stream. Take notes, pray about it afterwards, and where this knowledge applies to your life. Apply this knowledge to glorify our Heavenly Father. Thank you. Before I continue, how are you all doing today? God is good, so how are you all doing today? Amen. All right. We're going to start right into the topic. One moment. And okay, let me share the screen first. One moment, y'all. All right. Let's just kind of refresh this again. One moment, y'all. Okay. This is an article from the Canadian Center to End Human Trafficking. And it's from 2nd of July 2020. So it's almost 6 years old. Let's read though. Okay, let me make this bigger first. Although human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation can affect anyone regardless of their gender and identity, narratives around this crime too often fail to account for this reality. There exists research and education on sex trafficking disproportionately and at times exclusively focus on the experience of females, leaving male victims and survivors out of the conversation. Moreover, when men and boys are included, the conversation usually centers around preventing them from being perpetrators of violence and human trafficking. While this is an important conversation to explore, if the only narrative is that of males as perpetrators, we risk amplifying barriers to identifying and supporting male victims and survivors. Okay. Unfortunately, the number of male victims trafficked for sexual exploitation in Canada is under researched and oftentimes debated. Yet, by looking at statistics around sexual assault and sexual abuse, one can have access to data around sexualized violence perpetrated against males. For instance, Association of Alberta Sexual Adult Assault Centers writes most research suggests that 10% to 10% of all males will experience some form of sexual abuse or sexual assault at some point in their lives. Well, while the Ontario government echoes this statement by um, saying the number is approximately 1 in 6. And while other studies suggest this number could even be higher. Although sexual abuse, sexual assault are only one aspect of sex trafficking, and the issues should not be conflated, these numbers should also be dismissed. Despite the lack of reliable sex trafficking specific data for males in Canada, the majority of research organizations and advocacy groups agree on the fact that sexual violence, including sex trafficking perpetrated against males, is vastly underreported. This idea is reinforced by a 2008 report on commercial sexual exploitation of children in the United States, which interviewed 249 youth involved in the commercial sex industry prior to the age 18. Given that 45% of interviewees were male, the author authors drew the conclusion that although it is likely that most CSEC youth are female, the evidence obtained in this study suggests that there is a significant male population as well, especially in the borough of Manhattan. Based on the findings of the study, one could suggest that these could also be applicable in Canada. Okay. Looking at the available research also provides interesting insights into the psychological challenges faced by male victims and survivors. For instance, despite facing significant trauma as a result of sexual exploitation, research indicates that males will often wait for longer than females to disclose sexual violence and seek help. This difference can be explained by the unique barriers specific to men and boys wishing to disclose sexual exploitation and trafficking, or to even be identified as a victim of trafficking, including lack of education, perception of masculinity. Okay, we're not going to go to all of this. Just know it happens. It's another This is article 2021. Growing number of male survivors talk about being a sex trade victim. Wow. Every year, thousands of boys and young men fall victim to the country's flourishing sex trade. A lot of them are vulnerable to traffickers and sex buyers because of homelessness and poverty. Jennifer McKinn of JBH News Center for Investigative Reporting says male victims often go unseen and unhelped. And a warning, the story contains descriptions that are disturbing. Jennifer McCain byline. Jose Alfaro was 16 years old and homeless when was lured into the country's illegal sex trade. It was still years later that the now 30-year-old Boston hairstylist realized he wasn't to blame. Jose Alfaro, I didn't see myself as a victim. I saw myself as someone who participated in business with him. McCain. Alfaro says his parents kicked him out of their house because he was gay. He met a man on the internet who offered him a place to stay and then forced him to provide client sexual massages. Some became violent. Usually ran away. Okay, we don't have to go through the whole interview over here. You can look at it up yourself over here. You can see the link. This is article 2013. Um, and it's a law article, as you can see, human trafficking, the missing male victim. We're not going to read all of it, but okay, let's read. On March 7, 2013, President Barack Obama signed a bill reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. The reauthorization of Violence Against Women Act was a bipartisan effort despite a tumultuous political dynamic and undeniably makes strides for survivors of domestic violence. Instantly, the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act was added as an amendment to the VAWA reauthorization. In the past, the TVPRA has been called landmark legislation and even the centerpiece for all U.S. anti-human trafficking laws. Simply put, the TVPRA's reauthorization was critical to help build awareness around anti-trafficking and those at risk of being trafficked, strengthening services for victims, bring traffickers to justice, and overall protect the human rights of children and adults in the US and around the world. However, more troubling than this important legislation remaining expired since December 11 may be that it was embedded in VEWA, an act aimed at putting a stop to violence against women and other vulnerable groups. This time around, VEWA was brought to protect Native Americans, LGBT women, and illegals who are victims of domestic violence, rape, and sex trafficking. Such an expansion makes it seem relevant, if not typical, to place TVPRA in VAWA as a codification of a universal stereotype that human trafficking happens only to women and children. However, this approach to human trafficking is problematic at best because it ignores the prominence of male victims of human trafficking in the United States and abroad. It is clear that a disproportionate number of trafficking victims are women, comprising about two-thirds of reported victims, while men make up the majority of traffickers. In fact, over 90% of the prison population worldwide is comprised of men. Many of these are behind bars for violent crimes. However, like the trafficking of women, the trafficking of men is also universal. While some reports indicate that women may be subject more to exploitative conditions or more vulnerable to becoming victims of forced labor or trafficking, and more subject to violence, sexual exploitation than men, there are fewer gender differences when it comes to vulnerability to exploitation and abuse. The response of human trafficking victims based on their sex is universal as well, while scholars rightfully focus much of their attention on the male demand, perpetrating a vicious cycle of trafficked women. There's little discussion concerning the male victim himself. It is important to first dispel any belief that location, age, family status, or lack of education is determinative of a male's susceptibility of being trafficked. While the desire to, hold on, well, I make this bigger. While desire to earn money has been a common denominator in men's decisions to migrate, most studies show that the vast majority of victims of trafficking and exploited migrants consider themselves to be poor at the time of migrating. This too is not determinative of susceptibility to being trafficked. This is because male victims are generally recruited and trafficked by use of deceptive tactics. Male victims are often controlled by psychological, physical, and sexual abuse. Male victims in every country, for example, Cambodian men and boys have been deceived into long-haul fishing boats out to sea for up to 2 years or more in virtual prisons on which the trafficking victims endure inhuman working conditions and physical abuse. Further, while everyone knows that Afghanistan is one of the world's worst places to be female, few people realize that Afghanistan is one place in the world where boys are more likely to be trafficked than girls. Additionally, the Salvation Army reports that 41% of the adult victims of human trafficking that it assists in England and Wales are men. Why they write Wales like a whale? But anyway, these worldwide occurrences should be no surprise as they have been recognized and documented in the U.S. State Department's 2012 Trafficking in Persons report, which further details the stories of men or boys trafficked in India, Brazil, and Burma, Thailand. Male victims are seen in United States as well, often in child pornography. The sex trafficking of young boys feeds the high demand for child pornography in the United States, more than half of which features boys rather than girls. In addition to child pornography, the rising demand for discounted labor combined with men from poverty-stricken nations migrating to the United States for work has resulted in the labor trafficking of males domestically. These male victims are not just from abroad, they are comprised of U.S. citizens, legal residents, and lawful visitors too. Overall, male victims of human trafficking are roughly undetected. Okay, we don't have to go further. Okay, let's look at the following. Sextortion, growing crime against men. Article 1223 from Psychology Today. Let's read. Men are being targeted for sextortion and increased rates in the United States and beyond. And then all of a sudden, there's a victim speaking. I got messages late at night with all sorts of threats, said Alex. Things about sharing intimate photos about the things we had and threatening me. Alice continued. Depression set in. I was so angry at myself. I was so angry at myself and I felt so stupid that I fell into like a trap. This participant in our research was a victim of sextortion, a combination of sexual and extortion. Sextortion is when a perpetrator threatens to distribute sexual explicit images unless the victim complies with their demands. These demands may include money, additional images, sexual favors, and more. In some cases, victims have paid out thousands of dollars in response to perpetrators' threats. In another case, a perpetrator used sextortion to help secure legal rights to a shared home. Perpetrators of sextortion can access these images through a variety of means. They can steal or hack into victims' electronic devices or record victims without consent. Perpetrators can also digitally manipulate images of victims using AI to make them appear sexual. In other cases, consensually shared sexual images may be used for sextortion by current or former intimate partners, aka revenge porn. Finally, perpetrators can target victims in romance scams through online dating apps. While many victims of extortion are women, it might surprise you to hear that this one was a man. In the early centuries, extortion of minors was labeled a global crisis with international law, informed agencies. However, extortion has also been increasing among adult victims. Though women are at greater risk for most forms of image-based sexual abuse, research found that men were about twice as likely as women to have experienced sextortion during the pandemic. Some reasons for men's greater victimization may include that they are more likely to accept partners in online dating. Men are also fall prey to sextortion in an effort to escape isolation, which increased dramatically call for men in recent years in U.S. Finally, men are more likely than women to send. Okay, but that's a different matter. Okay, sextortion can have dramatic negative effects on victims. Our research found that men and women's sextortion victims experience greater anxiety, depression, economic distress, and physical symptoms than non-victims. Additional work found that more than half of a sample of 250 male victims of final sextortion reported suicidal ideation. This is especially concerning given men are at the already elevated risk of dying by suicide. Wow. Okay, 2026, 10th of April is recent. Not that recent, but this is like a little more than a month old, this image. Dutch police urge victims of international sextortion campaign to come forward. Dutch police have issued a social media plea for victims of alleged international sextortion campaign to come forward, warning that dozens of women and girls were coerced into degrading sexual acts on camera. Hold on a minute. Do you see the problem over here? What about the men? Okay, let's go to this article over here. I'm not going to all of it, but let me play this for you. One moment.
New charges will now hold a woman accused of molesting multiple teenage boys behind bars. Prosecutors say now 23-year-old Alyssa Zinger had sexual relationships with 4 more victims who were 13 and 14 years old.
This defendant lived a full life masquerading as a 14-year-old girlfriend to a true 14-year-old.
Zinger was first arrested in November, accused of having a months-long relationship with a teenage boy. Detectives say that investigation opened up more evidence, leading to the 4 additional victims. Prosecutors say Zinger posed as a 14-year-old homeschooled student, messaging these boys on Snapchat and TikTok. They say there's also video evidence of multiple sexual acts. Zinger's attorney says she has a history of emotional and developmental challenges.
I think it's clear from just the content of the text messages, this is not a 22-year-old adult having communication with somebody who she saw as her equal.
This is not a 22-year-old child. This is an adult. This is a 22-year-old adult.
Prosecutors also pointed to Zinger's parents. They showed body camera footage from a search at their home. Investigators say Zinger's father gave them a phone he claimed was Alyssa's, but it was registered to Alyssa's mother and hadn't been used since 2021. A detective on the case says she went back a second time, and Zinger said she had lost her phone. Arguing for her release a second time, Zinger's attorney said she hasn't violated any conditions of her pretrial release.
She remained in Hillsborough County, knowing that these potential other cases or counts could be added.
Ultimately, the judge said no terms of release would have the safeguards to keep the community safe.
You don't really seem to grasp the problem here. You are the problem here. Your actions on these boys are illegal. And it's not okay. Whether they took the video or you took the video, you are the only adult.
Okay. Yeah. So, and these type of things. Okay, let's look at this. I'm not going to all the articles. Let's look at the titles. We interviewed Australian women who sexually abused children. This is what we learned. Here, woman faced life sentence after being found guilty of raping and abusing boyfriend's 11-month-old baby. Woman accused of abusing boys at care home denies sexual interest in children. Ex-UP junior engineer, his wife gets death for sexually abusing 33 boys, selling their videos. Something to do with India, I believe. And the same thing again. Female teacher charged of inappropriate relationship with boy. So, as you see over here, is that there is a taboo almost in the world in addressing boys and grown men who are the victim of sexual exploitation and sexual violence, especially if the violence is either done or initiated by women. Well, let me tell you, this is not something new. It's just that now people tend to pay more attention to it openly because of the internet, social media, and things. Information spreads more quickly. What if I told you that in ancient times there was also this sadistic urge in many women to sexually humiliate and sexually extort men? And even though societies back then were predominantly patriarchal, not based on male leadership, but based on patriarchy. Patriarchy is a sodomite system from ancient Greece that allegedly favored men just to let's say, just to go against the femininity. So that's a better way to say it. Even though the patriarchal societies back then, I'm not talking about societies where it's based on male leadership. Male leadership is natural and healthy, God-given. Patriarchy is a system from the ancient Greeks and Romans, and it's all about men being aggressive and fighting over other men being in charge. So that's not healthy. So despite the patriarchal structure of many ancient societies at the time, women still were allowed an outlet to take advantage of men sexually. And they even were assigned a fallen angel to worship for it, y'all. I'm not kidding you all. Let's read. Okay? Priapus. In Greek mythology, Priapus is a minor rustic fertility god, protector of livestock, fruit plants, gardens, and male genitalia. Priapus is marked by his oversized penis and his permanent erection, which gave rise to the medical term priapusm. This is a medical condition, by the way. He became a popular figure in Roman erotic art and Latin literature, and is the subject of the often humorously obscene collection of verse called the Priapeia. Okay? And it's already depicted deity, y'all. Look at this, y'all. Now, hold on. Let me go back. What? Okay. Priapus was described in varying sources as the son of Aphrodite by Dionysus, as the son of Dionysus and Chione, as perhaps the father or son of Hermes, or as the son of Zeus or Pan. According to legend, Hera cursed him with inconvenient impotence. He could not sustain an erection when the time came for sexual intercourse, ugliness and foul-mindedness while he was still in Aphrodite's womb. In revenge for the hero, Paris having the temerity to judge Aphrodite more beautiful than Hera. In Greek mythology, there were three goddesses. There was competition, who was the most beautiful. Aphrodite didn't win the contest, so she cursed uh, the baby in the womb of another goddess. Okay, so you know the myths start with sexual violence, even harm towards children. Okay, let's continue. In another account, Hera's anger and curse were because the baby had been fathered by her husband Zeus. Oh, this is worse. So you hate your own husband, so now you take it out on the baby instead of taking out dealing with your husband. You're the one decided to be with your husband, remember? Or you could have left him. The other gods refused to allow him to live on Mount Olympus and threw him down to earth, leave him on a hillside. So he was an outcast. He eventually found by shepherds and was brought up by them. Priapus joined Pan and the Satyrs as a spirit of fertility and growth, though he was perennially frustrated by his impotence. In a ribald anecdote told by Ovid, he attempted to rape the goddess Hestia but was throttled by an ass's donkey, whose braying caused him to lose his erection at the critical moment and woke Hestia. Hestia is the goddess of housing, by the way. The episode gave him a lasting hatred of asses and a willingness to see them killed in his honor. The emblem of his lustful nature was his permanent erection and his large penis. Another myth states that he pursued the nymph, Lotis, until the gods took pity on her and turned her into a lotus plant. Priapus is a title given to Eros Phanes in the Orphic hymn to Propagonas, the firstborn god of the Greeks who came from the cosmic egg. In the Orphic hymn to Dionysus, Dionysus is given an epithet similar to Protogonos and was thought of as the incarnation of Protogonos. So he was considered both the father of fertility god Priapus and also the incarnation of the primordial Priapus. Hold on. Hold on. Let's read this too. In always fasting, the nymph Lotus fell into a drunken slumber at the feast, and Priapus seized this opportunity to advance upon her. With stealthy approach, and just before he could embrace her, Silence's donkey alerted the party with righteous braying. Lotus awoke and pushed Priapus away, but her only true escape was to be transferred to the lotus tree. To punish the donkey for spoiling its opportunity, Priapus bludgeoned it to death with his gargantuan phallus. So use the same phallus that couldn't be erected to beat up a donkey. Okay. When the same story is recounted later in the same book, Lotus is replaced with the virginal goddess Hestia, while voice being changed into a tree as the other Olympians came to rescue. Ovid's anecdote served to explain why donkeys were sacrificed to Priapus in the city of Lampsacus on the Hellespont, where he was worshipped among offspring of Hermes. Once a donkey had given human speech by Dionysus challenged Priapus to a contest about which between them had the better penis. Priapus won the contest and then killed the donkey, which is put by Dionysus among the stars. The first extant mention of Priapus in the eponymous comedy Priapus, written in the 4th century BC by Xenarchus, originally worshipped by Greek colonists in Lampsacus and Asia Minor. The cult of Priapus spread to mainland Greece and eventually to Italy during the 3rd century BC. Lucian tells that in Britannia, Priapus was accounted as a warlike god, a rustic tutor to the infant Ares, who taught him dancing first and war only afterwards. Carl Kereni observed Arbonius is aware of the importance according to Priapus in his region near the Hellespont. Also, Pausanias notes this god is worshipped where goats and sheep pasture over there are swarms of beasts. By the people of Lampsacus, he is more revered than any other god, being called by them a son of Dionysus and Aphrodite. In late antiquity, servitude meant little more than a cult of sophisticated pornography. Outside his home region of in Asia Minor, Priapus was regarded as something of a joke by urban dwellers. However, he played a more important role in the countryside, where he was seen as a guardian deity. He was regarded as a patron god of sailors and fishermen, others in need of good luck, and his presence was believed to avert the evil eye. Priapus does not appear to have an organized cult and was mostly worshipped in gardens or homes, though there are attestations of temples dedicated to the god. His sacrificial animal was the ass, but agricultural offerings such as fruit, flowers, vegetables, and fish were also very common. Long after the fall of Rome and the rise of Christianity, Priapus continued to be invoked as a symbol of health and fertility. The 3rd century Lenocross chronicled a history of northern England and Scotland records a lay Cistercian brother erecting a statue of Priapus in an attempt to end an outbreak of cattle disease. In the 1980s, D.F. Cassidy founded the St. Priapus Church as a modern church centered on the worship of the phallus. Okay. Whoa, it's still in existence? Wow. A church dedicated to this deity, yo, from the 1980s. Okay. Priapus' role as a patron god for merchant sailors in ancient Greece and Rome is that of a protector of navigational aid. Recent shipwreck evidence contains apotropic items carried on board by mariners in the form of a terracotta phallus, wooden propria figure, and bronze sheath from a military ram. Coinciding with the use of the wooden Priapiatic markers erected in areas of dangerous passage or particular landing areas for sailors, the function of Priapus is much more extensive than previously thought. Although Priapus is commonly associated with the failed attempts of rape against the nymph Lotus and Vesta in Ophis Fasti and the rather flippant treatment of the deity in urban settings, Priapus' protection traits can be traced back to the importance placed on the phallus in ancient times, particularly associated with fertility and garden protection. In Greece, the phallus was thought of to have a mind of its own, animal-like, separate from the mind and control of the man. The phallus is also associated with the possession and territorial demarcation in many cultures, adding to Priapus' other role as navigational deity. Wow. In Rome, this entity was called Mutunus Tutunus or Mutinus Titinus. Let's read. In ancient Roman religion, Mutunus Tutunus or Mutinus Tutinus was a phallic marriage deity, in some respects equated with Priapus. His shrine was located on the Velen Hill, supposed since the founding of Rome until the 5th century BC. During preliminary marriage rites, Roman brides are supposed to have straddled the phallus of Mutinus to prepare themselves for intercourse, according to church fathers who interpreted this act as an obscene loss of virginity. Okay, it's quite the Christian apologist Arbonius says the Roman matrons were taken for a rite on Tutunus' awful phallus with its immense shameful parts, but other sources specify that it was brides who learned through the ritual not to be embarrassed by sex. Titunus, upon whose shameful lap it sit brides, so that the god seems to sample their shame before the fact. The 2nd century grammarian Festus is the only classical source to take note of the god, and the characterization of the rite by Christian sources is likely to be hostile or biased. Well, hostile, biased. Unlike Priapus, which depicted in human form with an outsized erection, Mutunus seems to have been embodied purely by the phallus, like Faustinus or Mecius, beget of Servius Tullius. The god's name is related to two infrequent recorded slang words for penis in Latin, muto and mutonium. Muto was also used as cognomen, the third of the three elements of a Roman man's name. Lucilius offers the earliest record instance of both forms. Um, At laiva lacrimas mutuni abstercat amica. A girlfriend wipes away Muto's tears. His left hand, that is. And the left, oh, okay. This is not necessary. The shrine of MUTUNUS TUTUNUS on the Vela had not still been located. According to Festus, it was destroyed to make a private bath for the pontifex and Augustan supporter Domitius Calvinus, even though it was revered as among the most ancient landmarks. This uprooting raised the question of why Calvinus was permitted to display such a vulnerable shrine. The church fathers associated Mutinus with groupings of other deities that are assumed to be based on the lost geological works of Varro. Through examining these connections, Robert Palmer concluded that the old cult of Mutinus was merged with that of Father Liber. Father Liber was versely identified or shared attributes with Jupiter, Bacchus, whatever. Anyway, you can do your for research if you want. Just know there was a fallen angel, or best said, a rape spirit that was worshipped by the ancient Greeks and also Romans, or by the ancient world in general. And yes, they associated the worship of deity with protection when you're traveling by sea or by land. But what it's really about? It's like this. In ancient times, men, even though much of societal institutions cater to men, that does not automatically mean that men were considered valuable. A man was expected to earn his value. That also means if a man wasn't able to earn his value, he was looked down upon. He was considered a loser. So if he was considered a loser, he was considered to be, you know, not only off limits when it comes to friendship or sexual relations, also he was going off limits when it comes to protection. Now, this was not formally in the laws, but hey, uh, if you're considered a loser of a man, people wouldn't lose sleep at night if you were violated. And remember, you also had male slaves that were that had to uh, that were the outlet of sexual violence by not only their masters, also by those around in the community. Because sometimes the the slave masters would rent out their male slaves to be the sexual outlet of the public's rage. So, how do they justify um, the sexual exploitation and sexual violation of men, including young boys in general, when it relates to women? Because you know there were men that were lusting after boys, but they had the institution called the pederasty for it, and you had other religious ways where they could quote unquote channel this pedophilic energy, and that was with the worship of the fallen angel Ganymedes. So Ganymedes, whom today is referred to as Baphomet, was the pedophile deity for the men. And for general rapists or serial killers who are after women, you had yet another fallen angel that it called Pan, which is symbolized as a goat deity, uh, to facilitate that in society. For women who just want to take advantage of men sexually to get something out of them, whether it's financial, just emotional, or just want to set men up to be victimized to other men for some sadistic release, you had the deity Priapus. So in ancient times, if women had daddy issues or like a father complex, or women just had the resentment towards men in general, that resentment towards men was dangerous for the community's function. Also because many of the main important functions in the community and also in our society were fulfilled by men. So that would be a problem if women had resentment towards men. So when a woman had resentment towards men, was rooted in childhood trauma, it was rooted in issues against the father, whatever, it was known that if women would have an outlet for this um, resentment towards men, it's going to cause a lot of trouble. So the way ancient this was is by installing a false god to worship that justified sexual humiliation, sexual relation of men and boys if you do it in a ritual way. So because this was an embarrassment that so many women had resentment towards men, I'm not saying all women had resentment towards men, of course not, but it was a widespread thing that women had resentment towards men. Well, no wonder if you have a culture that kind of has this misogyny often. What what happens is that women were given an outlet just so they could remain functional in society or in the local community. So, but because it was an embarrassment to begin with, a lot of women resented the men instead of, you know, voluntarily submitting onto them. That's why this deity was worshipped, but in an informal way. Deities like Dionysus or Hermes or Satan himself as Jupiter, all these other deities had temples. Some were even funded by the government. They were official in your face. They were recognized. This deity was worshipped, but the little shrine he had was destroyed. So that means that even in ancient times, they didn't want to admit that they were facilitating women to sexually exploit and sexually violate men like that. But it happened. But again, it was in an informal way. So, but the thing is, the worship of Priapus continued. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it over here. Okay, here it is. Big black cock, usually showed BBC, is a sexual slang term for a genre of ethnic pornography that focuses on black men with large penises. Terms often used by both straight and gay pornography. Okay, I shouldn't have to get more into this, but this is also a modern form. Yeah, modern. It's a post-colonial form of worshiping Priapus. In this case, the victims of the worship are what they call black men, men from African descent, or from Afro-Moorish descent, better said. But it doesn't only happen with men from Afro-Moorish descent. This is a thing that goes on worldwide. Now, you even have penis festivals in other cultures um, where they don't explicitly show it like this, but I'll kind of keep it a bit more hidden. Here, the Shinto Kanamara Matsuri, Festival of the Steel Phallus, is an annual Japanese festival held each spring at Kanayama Shrine. The exact dates vary. The main festivals fall on the first Sunday in April. The phallus, as a central theme of the event, is reflected in illustrations, candy, carved vegetables, decorations, and a Mikoshi parade. Okay, yeah. So they have a whole parade showing penis symbols. The shrine is part of the Wakamiya Hachimangu Shrine, located near Kawasaki Dashi Station. The Kanamara Matsuri is centered around the Kanayama Shrine, where the god Kanayama Hiko and the goddess Kanayama Hime are venerated. They both are gods of blacksmithing, metalsmithing, and metalworks, and are also prayed to for easy childbirth, marital harmony, and protection from sexually transmitted infections. So, okay, so this type of phallus worship is a bit more civilized, but you need to consider why this obsession with the phallus. I mean, if people would go around with sculptures of vaginas, a lot of people want to be comfortable with it. By the way, I don't even do that in Japan because it will be shut down. People are not okay with it. But I do it with the phallus. Listen, this cock worship, as some call it today, is a front for sexual exploitation and sextortion of men, even sexual exploitation of boys, which has been going on since ancient times. But the thing is, when the exploitation was done by men, it often remained between closed doors because it was all done in a ritual way. But when women get involved, it takes a whole nother dimension. When the women are involved in it, they often allow other men to do the kidnapping and all the other stuff for them, all the hard work, and they just extract whatever they want from these men, whether it's attention or just sexual affection in general, or cash, or they want some business deal out of them. This is a thing that goes on in the world, y'all. But as you notice, it's barely talked about. Why? Just like in ancient times, they avoided this deity. Even though deity was there as an established deity to worship, they didn't formalize his deity by funding large temple complexes. At least, maybe they did for a little while here and there, but it wasn't widespread and continuous like with the other deities. So it could be that a local governor or mayor back in the day founded a temple for this entity. I'm not saying it never happened, but long-term, widespread funding by the authorities for this deity, I couldn't find any source on it. If you have it, let me know. What we can know till now is this deity was avoided uh, publicly, except during festivals, and also after ancient times, after antiquity, um, the worship deity remained, but it was undercover, and it's and the worship of the deity transformed into other forms that don't directly display this figure over here. So let's get this straight. Men can be the victim of sexual exploitation and sex trafficking too. Even though it works a bit different when a man is victimized, it happens, y'all. And the reason why it's not often talked about nor addressed, the main reason is because it's a type of worship. That's why. That's why it's not stopped, y'all. Cock worship is worship of Priapus, a fallen angel. And this filthy entity, this demon, is a rape spirit that feeds off of the trauma of the men who are subjected to all these violations. And because this is a worldwide phenomenon, a lot of people want to address it because the whole image as women as solely victims of violence is then debunked. And if they would acknowledge that this is a worldwide problem, feminism wouldn't be able to survive either, because feminism not always often thrives off female victimhood. A female as victimizers are often avoided by feminists. So men are often portrayed as the perpetrators, women as victims. But I'm telling you, it's not that simple. There's a worldwide network to the criminal world of victimizing men sexually to generate trauma energy. This emotional pollution is feeding the demons, especially this entity Priapus. So what do we do about it as a believer? First of all, as a believer, we're against any type of sexual violence at all. We're against that, absolutely. We don't fight it off like the world does, because that's only going to lead to more violence that even will strengthen it. We emphasize sexual health and sexual stability everywhere we go. For both men and women, we value both men and women in a Christ-centered way. That is what we do. Now, if you are the victim of sexual, if you're a man, you're the victim of sexual exploitation or sex trafficking, yo, um, I would say just report it. But if you don't want to go through that, I'm not in your shoes. I don't know how deep your trauma is. Anyway, just know this help for you out there. First of all, pray about it. Don't be ashamed. It's not your fault. Stop blaming yourself. Get your help. And don't even think about ending your life. No, your life is worth it. Keep going, bro. Just understand the following, y'all. The world has no solutions. The world only cope with issues. And one way the world allows women to cope with the resentment they may have towards men is by channeling that rage towards men to male victims of sexual exploitation or sex trafficking. Women informally get leeway to ridicule and emotionally abuse men who are not quote unquote masculine or strong enough. They used to be condoned widely, but over time it decreased. What I mean, for example, back in the day, in the 19th century, even 20th century, and even before that, if there was war and you as a man didn't want to go to war, women would make a crown of flowers and put it on your head and declare you're a girl now. A way to humiliate you like you're not a true man. There's a one way of emasculating and sexually humiliating men by act like they're not actual men. And yet you have other cultural ways where women are given an outlet to ridicule or even spell cast harm on men sexually. One way it was done in the Western world is by not keeping women in check when they blame men for all their problems. That's also a way of emasculating men. There are also many sitcoms and movies where men are always portrayed as ridiculous beings that women treat like trash. There's also a form of PRIAPUS worship, y'all. So the worship of deity is widespread, y'all, but it's just not formalized because if they would formalize it, it would shock you how cruel and nasty fallen mankind can be, including the women in the world. But we as believers, y'all, we laugh at all of this. We know it happens, it's horrible, but hey, we emphasize sexual health and sexual stability in a state of joy. We decree and declare and speak out sexual well-being and sexual health on ourselves and our environment. This is not the way we go. We do it in a state of joy, y'all. This is how we break down the negative energy pressure that's built in Earth's atmosphere through all the emotional pollution caused by the trauma of these male victims of sexual exploitation. This is what we do. This is what we do, y'all. Are there any questions about this topic? Let me know in the live chat, please. I'm about to start my other live stream immediately after finishing this one, so stay tuned on my channel to watch the other live stream after this. But are there any questions on this topic right now? Let me know. Okay, I didn't get any questions. Anyway, I know it's a shocking topic I discussed, but hey, I'm going to the Greek pantheon, also Roman pantheon, so these are things I need to address, y'all. This is the world you're living in, y'all. But anyway, don't be afraid of the world. Be of good cheer. Christ overcame the world. Just stay in agreement with Christ. Stay joyful. And I'll see you in the next live stream. God is good.